Shalom from Jerusalem. My name is Albert Veksler. I'm the director of Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast, and we are here in our office with answers for allies. Together with me is an amazing man, Jack van der Tang. Really happy to have you here with us. You were the one organized the Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast in The Hague in 2019.
Yes, I am. I can't forget it.
Well, it was one of the most remarkable events we've ever had.
You know, I was looking for a tool for the battle in The Hague. And I remember that we visited 2018 Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast. I couldn't come in 2017, we had other things. And I was really nervous about going to the Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast. What is this? What is this for a club? Is this all kinds of religious? Is it interreligious? I was a little bit nervous. When my wife and me, we listened and we were there and we listened to you, we were really impressed about your bold statements about how it was. We loved it.
Thank you.
And I remember that one moment I heard the voice of the Holy Spirit. This is what you need, bring it to The Hague. And then you start to talk about, you was planning to go international. And we never met. Shaking hands before, and then I remember that I walked to you after Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast. I said, can we talk? I really want to have the Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast in The Hague. And you said, yes, Jack, this is from God. And then you walked away. And you leave us alone.
Well, I didn't walk away.
No, of course not. But I remember, because you were so busy.
I know.
I know how it works after. But later we met, and then we had the Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast, yes. And that was really a challenge. It's not easy. You need really to have a goal and a tool. It's a tool from God.
And
yes.
Again, I think what happened in The Hague is really the best example of how God changes history when Jews and Christians work together, pray together. Because you have had, of course, a very close relationship with the Jewish community in Holland. I mean, you've been working for many years, but you have a very respected position. I understand it from the rabbis and from the leaders that came.
But I believe personally that is very important, that they know you, they trust you, they are reliable. But for me, the most important is you cannot plan a Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast as an event. You need to prepare in prayer.
In prayer.
And we had a whole group of powerful intercessors, and that became the key for it. And I really feel that Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast is a tool, is not a goal, to do something in your nation. It's really a powerful tool, the Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast. And we prepared for many years, and then suddenly the Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast came, and as a tool that God gave us. And I think that we are praying for what can we do in The Hague, the battle. And yes, to be honest, I'm a man that I'm doing what the Lord shows me. I have no expectations because I can't change anything. That is to God. If you have asked me, what do you want to do in The Hague, or do you expect from the Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast? I would say, I have no clue. And that's always what I've done. I have no clue. I'm doing the things that God showed me, and that's the result from The Hague was above everything. Yeah.
I still remember we were in the Ridderzaal, which was a miracle in itself, because only the king gives a speech from there. A parliament building, and
the oldest parliament building in the whole world,
which
is still in functioning,
which has no air conditioning.
And
I remember that.
Yes.
It was a very hot day, and I think what happened was that they started opening the windows and
the door, the entrance,
and then the entrance,
head entrance,
which is never opened unless the king comes.
The head entrance. The lady that is responsible came to me, asked me, "Do we get permission to open the door?" And I said, "What is the reason that you need my permission? Because I'm just." She said, "No, you organized it." I said, "What is the problem?" She said, "No, people can listen." Oh, open the door. But later we heard that one day a year, when there's a big event which the king is doing his speech, he is the only person that can enter by the main entrance. Nobody else. And of course the Queen, but all the other people, the Prime Minister, all the people from the Parliament have to enter through a side door. And then it was so interesting that people came, and also Yehuda Klik said, the real king came in by the front door. And I was watching him thinking, is Yehuda that's saying? And others said it was really powerful, yes.
It was, but again, when this moment came, your speech, I remember your speech, and you were saying, you were quoting Isaiah, saying, my people is robbed, and no one says,
give back.
Give back. And then your voice broke in tears. And you said it one more time, give back.
You know, 22 years before, when I started to organize my first Israel evening, I prayed about the church. And I asked the Lord, just a very simple bit. Lord, I want to rent this and this church. Is that okay for you? And then I heard the half nights. I said, no, I don't mean it. I don't mean that church. And again, for the second time, the half nights. And that was really a new experience for me, to hear the voice of God. So I became nervous, and then I did some research. And a long story short, Netanyahu was the prime minister. We had friends that he was coming to the Netherlands, but then they refused it because the Minister of Foreign Affairs said, we don't want to have him, we don't agree with the settlements in Jerusalem or in Israel, and so he's not allowed to come. We're not going to invite him. But I had such an amazing confirmations. So when the Jerusalem prayer breakfast was coming, and I prayed in the night in my bed, praying, Lord, where shall we do the reception for the parliament's members? I heard for the third time the half nights. And I shared it with the intercessors. And then I had very strange things happening. In the middle of the night, I wake up and my alarm was 22, 22. I think, I was going later to bed. This happened not once, it happens many times. When I was flying to Jerusalem, to San Antonio, to the Jerusalem prayer breakfast, I was in the airplane, 22, the row 22. When my hotel was on the 22. I had room 22, 22, 22, 22. And I start to ask my intercessors, what's going on? Is there and people give me very nice scriptures, but I didn't feel this, is it? Then somebody from my team have a very simple question. Jack, when spoke the Lord for the first time about the half nights? I said, I need to do some research, and I found out 22 years before. So it was 22 years that God spoke, and then this happening. And this is so sensitive that we are doing it. You know, we had a discussion about who can preach I can tell you normally, if you want to do something for the parliament in this building, they're doing sometimes events, it's very difficult. But you have to have permission from the government and the parliament, at last, 3 months before. I was working with a friend from the parliament. We didn't get permission.
Was it Eppo Branch?
Yes,
Yes.
Eppo.
Amazing man.
And we didn't get any permission. And that's also what I said last weekend when I was in Sweden, that nobody knows. If you're responsible, you know what it is. If you have 400 people coming, and you have to say, we're going in faith to the half nights, and you have no permission, and you have no exit. And 10 days before we had the Jerusalem prayer breakfast, we had a breakthrough. Nobody knows what the burden is on your shoulders. So I have some experience what it is to have on the last moment to enter. But even all the speakers we had permissions from the speakers. We had also, and I think that's a nice story to share here. I found out that the half nights was used as the first speech when the Germans possessed the Netherlands. The first speech of the man who was responsible for the Netherlands, Sijs Inquart, did a speech in the half nights with a red carpet out, everything. And everybody knows what happens with the Jews. We have the highest rate in the whole west of Europe from the Jews that are killed. Not the highest number, but we had 85% from the Jews that were killed in the war. And I know that There was never, ever have been any apologize. So that was what I used as a tool to enter this building. And I remember that I invited also, because we became friends with the ambassador, Israeli ambassador, to come and to speak there. And I was in Jerusalem. You invited me for an interview here on CBN. Together we have this interview. And I remember that when I was walking here in Jerusalem, that the ambassador called me. That was not what he was doing always his secretary. But he said, Jack, I have a question and you need to give me permission. You have to give me advice. So I started to laugh. I said, I need to give an advice to an ambassador? No, Jack. The secretary of the king called me. That he invited me at the morning of when we have the Jerusalem prayer breakfast. So I can't come to the half night. And I became a little bit upset about the king, what he have done. I didn't like it at all. But he said, what shall I do? And I was thinking, I said, Lord, give me wisdom. And I said, listen, Aviv, I think that the king is more important than Jack van der Tang. So listen to him. So later they changed the time so he could come, the first part. And normally if you're going to the king, there is a whole procedure. They will pick you up at the embassy or at the residence. There is no other option. And what happens was, then they called him, where do you want us to pick you up? He said, at the half night. And they said, no, that's not possible. That's against the whole thing. And then he said, again, no, I want to be picked up there. And then they start to discuss, and then they said, okay, what is the reason that you want to be picked up? And he shared about the Jerusalem prayer breakfast. We didn't mention Jerusalem prayer breakfast at the half nights because we were not allowed to do anything about prayer and religious things. Long story short, he's the only ambassador ever who had the permission to be picked up somewhere else.
That was quite a sight.
And that was for the ambassador who is secular. He was picked up by an, how do you call it? Some big
motorcade.
car. Yes, 8 motorbikes.
Motorcycles, yeah.
And he was brought to the king. And the first thing the king asked, what have you done in the half nights? So he could share as the eyewitness and with being there, what happens there. That became later important for what he's going to do a year later. And in the evening, the ambassador asked me, what shall I share tonight? I said to him, people start to laugh, don't share your boring stuff, what you're always sharing. And people said, that's not what you can say to an ambassador. I said, I'm saying it, share from your heart. You're leaving the Netherlands, share from your heart. He said, I'm going to share from what happens this morning, because this is from God. And I said to him, oh no, Aviv, you're making me happy. I think that you became secular now, you're becoming religious. And he started to laugh. But we became very close friends because of that. He said, I have never seen, and later I was invited to other with ambassadors, and he started always to share about what happens there. So that was for me, you know, in the Second World War, when the men from Seyss Inquart came and brought by the red carpet, he was leaving on the red carpet. You see this, how do you call this car? I forgot the name in English, the big car.
The limousine?
The limousine,
yeah.
With the Israeli flags.
I remember
Leaving from the parliament and with the 8 motor bikes from the police. And he left. There was a spiritual restoration, what happens.
We were all watching.
Became so amazing.
We were all watching at the side,
Yes.
and we were really amazed. But I think what happened really was quite remarkable. I remember Eppo Branch running and shouting. It was in the dinner time.
Oh, yes.
And he comes, do you know what happens? I said, I don't know what happened. Do you know what happened? I said, if you don't tell us, we will never know what happens. And he said, the government released the money. So there was the reparation money for the Dutch railway.
Yeah, in the Netherlands, I'm ashamed. But when the Jews are going to the concentration camps, they're going by train. But they need to pay even their own ticket. And that was the whole discussion for years. And there was no breakthrough. And when I spoke the words, give back, and you know, when I start to pray and fast, Lord, if you want me to be there, then there have to be a message. And he gave me the words about give back. And when I said in the half nights about give back, My intercessors know. First, I'm going to speak like to everybody. A lot of ambassadors were there, and people from the parliament.
there
And then
was
the second time,
government people were
I
there.
spoke. Yes, I spoke to in the heavenlies, and then I became so emotional because the people have no idea about all the stress, what we had before, and to have this. And then when you speak, give back, and then this is coming as the first domino stone, because so many things happens after that.
Do you know how much money was it released? Tens of millions of euros.
To be honest, I can't remember, but I know only one thing. They talked about the money, that the Jews were ready to say yes. It was double.
So then a year later, COVID comes.
Half years later,
Yes.
we were invited, Inge and me, by the government, because on the Auschwitz celebration, or the remembrance, yearly
Commemoration.
yes, and the Prime Minister was going for the first time after the war, after 70 years, to apologize, according to the government, for what happens with the Jews. Nobody knows. We were the only one. For some government leaders know it, ministers, and we were the only one who were sitting there. And we heard, listen, Prime Minister can decide on the last moment to change his words. So we were very nervous, sitting there with the other parliament members, like Eppo. And when he did it, we started to cry like babies. We started to cry. And, this was not what you expected when you do a Jerusalem prayer breakfast. But this was on the radio, every radio station, every television station, every newspaper had this on the headlines. And nobody knows that in a way God used us for this. And it's not about us, it's about what's going to happen. And later, the king spoke about it, because it was so interesting. On the 4th of May, when we are thinking about all the victims of the war, and then the 5th of May we have the celebration that we are free, then there is a big event in Amsterdam, on the Dam. We call it on the Dam. And then the royal family is there. And the royal family is not talking. There's no speech. There are some people that are giving speech, they're bringing the flowers, and then the time of silence. Because of COVID, there was nothing. The whole square was quiet. Nobody was allowed, and only the king came. And the king have only given a speech there. Never happens after. Never happens before. But then he spoke. And we knew that he was going to do something about the result of the Jerusalem prayer breakfast in the Half Nights. And he has given some words that he was ashamed for his grandmother, who was the queen in the war in England, that she refused to talk about the Jews. She had really an anti-Jewish
So she
attitude.
was silent about
She
the
was
murder.
silent, and we know that even there were more than silent. And then later the Reformed Church apologized. And that was all the outcome of us. And we are not, we did it. And some others said, we have to go now further in this thing. So we are not all responsible for it, but it was a movement of the Holy Spirit that brought a domino effect. And so many stolen art were given back. The people were surprised. There was in the Netherlands, when the people came back, the Jews that left, and they came back after the war, they have to pay their tax. And they didn't live in The Hague. So that was really, they got also money for it. So many things are happening because of it.
I think if you look at the big picture, the change of government is the ripple effect of what happened. And I think we've seen the same in Sweden as well. I mean, we have seen now something really remarkable. There was a delegation from the Swedish parliament, the Riksdag, last August. And it was like 10 members of the Christian Democrat Party that came, and they wanted to meet with the Prime Minister. And long story short, this meeting was made possible. And so Benjamin Netanyahu meets them for 40 minutes, which was absolutely remarkable that he had and could take so much time with them. And then he said, when the last time a Swedish delegation came in 1960s.
Wow.
And so they, of course, spoke about a new era, about a new time between Sweden and Israel. And so, of course, we could not even think of these horrible events of October 7 and all what transpired ever since. But we are moving forward with the Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast in Stockholm. And you were just recently a part of a big event in Sweden where you discussed this.
Yeah, in Kalmar. And Sunday evening late back, Monday morning early to Israel. But yes, they start to share. We had a meeting with a lot of leaders there. And they start to share and to pray for the Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast on the 4th and 5th of April in Stockholm. And I really felt that this was so powerful. And I really believe that if people start to pray, God is going to move. And I think that the nation is desperate. The nation is desperate. And we know that the change is to bless Israel. And if Christians and leaders are going to see this and more understanding to pray and to bless Israel, and Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast is an excellent tool to change in the nation things and to bring people in. And yes, there I have a really an expectation about Stockholm and the Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast. So they prayed about it, and what I know, maybe you can share it more, because my translation at that moment, I don't talk Swedish. For me, it's like speaking in tongues sometimes. And but they shared about the history, about that the hotel that they're planning to do it. And I think it's so important. In which location are you going to organize Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast? And they are doing it in such a special place to restore what spiritual happens there.
You know, there is of course, a long story between Sweden and Israel. Number one, I mean, and something which has so deeply touched me for many years, is the heroic acts of Raoul Wallenberg.
Yeah.
Like nobody else, like Raoul Wallenberg, was able to save tens of thousands, some say 100,000 Jews from the sure, certain death in Hungary. And I mean, the way how he was, you know, so bold and able to push the Nazi officers, threatening them of the court cases against them, bringing these people. And he had a fictitious paper, Schutzpass. I mean, something that even the Swedish foreign ministry didn't really recognize, and yet it saved so many lives. And I really believe that this is the number one reason why it is on God's heart to bring an awakening to Sweden because of what Raoul Wallenberg did.
Yeah, your knowledge about the history of Sweden is much better than mine. I'm now involved more and more in Scandinavian nations. I became almost part of the leadership from some things. I'm surprised, but I'm so impressed by the leadership and the dedication to Israel and really believing in what I saw, the explosion of prayer for the Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast. I don't think that we had it in the Netherlands. So
well, it is so important because I mean we expect, of course, a change. But now there was another really sad story.
Yeah.
In 1947, I think Folke Bernadotte, and he's related to the king's family. He was murdered in Israel. He was sent as UN emissary to do some peace talks. I mean, to this day there is no sure knowledge who did it. It was not the state of Israel. The state of Israel didn't even exist at that time. There were some extremists who did it, but it basically caused a very deep wound in the relations between the countries. And I think we want to see these wounds healed. And we want to see a whole new era between Sweden and Israel, because Israel and Sweden have so much to offer each other.
But I understand that also the visit of Arafat was something that
was something very bad.
That they want to do something about that.
Because that caused a massive downfall in Sweden. The very.
And he visited the hotel where they're planning to do the Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast,
Yeah.
what I understand.
Right, and you see, of course, there are so many things in the history, mysterious things that people even don't know, who murdered Olof Palme, the prime minister, who invited Arafat to Sweden. I mean, there's many mysteries. I mean, you think of Oslo Accords. I understood from a Norwegian friend who said that most of the people that organized these Oslo talks from the Norwegian side, the politicians, either were murdered or died in very strange circumstances. Their lives ended before its time. I mean, they came after something that is so clearly forbidden in God's word. He says, you don't touch my land, you don't divide my land, it's my land. And once you start dividing it, you bring a judgment on yourself.
Yeah, that's what I understand also, that there was a prophetic word as a warning against this Prime Minister Palmer, Palmer, and that 3 years later, that he was killed on the streets. And I think it's very important to know, be careful what you said. If you touch my nation, if you touch my land, you will be in danger, yes.
And so even now, I mean, all of these events taking place, of course, in Israel, all around the world, about Israel, you see such a wave of demonstrations, such a wave of people supporting Hamas. I mean, 7,557 demonstrations against Israel, while only 602 for Israel. Of course, we are happy for these 602, but if you think of the ratio...
I had no idea about this number.
It is just unbelievable. And we want to encourage, of course, our friends to stand with Israel. We want to ask you to pray for us, because I think we will see a major breakthrough in the Middle East thanks to your prayers. Because prayer can change things. And Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast brings together the Jewish community and the Christian communities, friends of Israel. And whenever we've come together, and we can see it throughout the history, wherever this kind of cooperation has been taken place, miracles have taken place, history has been changed. And so that's why we are asking you to join us in prayer for Israel in this time. Pray for the Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast in Stockholm. It's going to be very, very, very important time. And remember, those who pray for the peace of Jerusalem and those who love Jerusalem will prosper. Those who bless the seed of Abraham will be blessed.